Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best practices and best ideas of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today, our subject is COVID-19 and chaos, how to strengthen your family and family office during uncertain times. We're so fortunate to have not one today, but three very, very special guests. Because we have three and we want to get right into the heart of it, I'm just going to briefly introduce who they are. I will treat each of the three sequential in my questions. There may be a little back and forth dialogue from the others, but for the most part, we're going to do it sequentially. We do have a live audience today, which makes it a little extra exciting, and we're really, really excited about that topic, and certainly there's been so much going on in it. Let me first have a chance to do the very brief introduction. First up will be Lonnie Ginger. That's of the Wilkinson Corporation. Next up will be Joelle Jarvis, founder, the Mindset Partnership, and last but never least, Mike Packman, managing partner, Keystone National Properties. All three people are incredibly accomplished, deeply experienced, and certainly have been wonderful relationships to me and my members of the Family Office Association. And this is really a topic where, there's no discussion per se on investing or real estate. It really is just simply the experiences of incredible entrepreneurs and talented people that we have on, and really addressing the issues that I noted in my open. We've been doing a lot on investing lately, and it's important sometimes to take a bit of a step back and look at more of the bigger picture. So first up, as I noted, is Lonnie. To give a little bit of context to my relationship with Lonnie, I've known Lonnie for a couple of years. He's an entrepreneur. He effectively is a family office in his own right. He's a wonderful family man and deep thinker, and incredibly successful in his business. But that really isn't as much going to be the purpose of our conversation today, although it is going to be to understand from a family perspective and unifying in the family office. I did a significant video series with Lonnie about a year ago, and it is up on my YouTube channels if you wanted to check that out. But we're going to ask some different questions to Lonnie today. Lonnie, why don't we start with welcome, by the way. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you too, Angelo.
Well, let's get right to it. You developed a bit of a reputation with family offices, a good reputation, I might add, for sharing and tools for families to create greater unity and synergy across the generations. Just sharing from your own family's experience. I know your family has multiple generations that effectively do their lives and businesses, I guess I could say, together. And I'm sure you've all been impacted, like we all have, by COVID. So my specific question for you to start off, what have you found most consistently helpful in keeping your family together during this time of crisis when so much is changing?
Yeah, good question. I think the last part of that question is what is the catalyst that's causing the challenges? So much is changing, and none of us have been down this path before. And I'm sure, like most of you who are listening to this, my family and I are dealing with challenges we never expected in our lifetime. We're having conversations about things that we thought we wouldn't be talking about. There's no data to predict this. There's no data to rely on for how to deal with this. And I think in the absence of experience or data, it can cause a great deal of uncertainty or even fear that can lead to actions or sometimes decisions that aren't best for the future of our businesses or even of our family, our relationships. So the question, I think, really is when everything around us is changing and so much seems uncertain, I think a valuable question is what are we committed to as a family that will remain constant in our lives and in our family? And we've talked about this as a family a few times since COVID hit. You know, what are the constants when so many things around us are changing? One of the examples that came to my mind as we were talking about this is years ago I was taking my pilot training, and I distinctly remember the day when we got up in the air and my instructor Alan put this hood on me so I couldn't see anything outside, just of course to simulate flying blind in the clouds. And you know, I was totally fine for the first couple of minutes, and I thought, I got this, right? Because I basically just froze and didn't move anything, right? But then all of a sudden we had some turbulence, and I got instantly disoriented because all of my familiar reference points were gone. And I was thinking that I was trying to correct to stay level and straight, but I put the plane like in this instant left bank nosedive. And Alan, the instructor, who had plenty of experience flying blind, he just calmly said, Lonnie, just stay focused on your instruments. Stay focused on your compass and stick with your flight plan. And that was super hard to do. I mean, and he had to keep bringing me back. Don't think, don't feel, just focus on your compass. What's your compass and altimeter telling you that you need to do right now at this point? He just kept saying that over and over again. And I felt like that many times during this crisis. Like, there's so much that's unfamiliar, uncertain. We're in all kinds of turbulence, but what is our compass telling us about what we should do right now, the decisions we should make right now? So I think during turbulent times like this, the most important question we can ask ourselves is, what is your compass? What's your personal compass, your business compass, your family compass telling you that you need to do right now? And I think the guiding compass that each of us have is, at least the way I look at it, it's really driven by our core values and our purpose or mission. What do we stand for, and why do we do what we do? And I think this principle applies to us as individuals and to our families and to our businesses. Our mission, our purpose, our values provide consistency and the basis for synergy and collaboration when we're kind of flying blind in this unknown territory like we're in so many ways right now. So we're in this storm, and there's no markers of things that are consistent, but the question is, what are your consistents in your family, regardless of crisis, challenges, changes? What are the things that are consistent? Get clear on those, focused on those, which means having conversations about those. And we've found that it's at least helping us navigate through this turbulent time.
It's important, the things that you mentioned in passion and purpose and developing, like you talk about, businesses have a game plan, have a mission statement. It's important for families to do that. And we're going to get to that, but I think it's important to have a little bit of a framework. From listening to you talk, it reminds me about the value of really being very open in your communication. If you're open in your communication, really a lot of problems could be solved. But I'm going to go a little bit of a step further, especially men from my generation. I'm not saying I'm that old, but I'm not 30 anymore. So from my generation, we tend not to want to show our vulnerabilities. Yet when you're talking about the issues with COVID, and you have an extended family like you do, and a lot of our families listening in, how important do you think it is to not only be an active communicator, but how that relates to sharing vulnerabilities?
Great question. You know, one of our values is open, honest, transparent, respectful communication. That's a mouthful, but open, honest, transparent, respectful communication. Just last night, we were gathered with our son and his wife, and she asked me a question about what challenges I'm facing in business right now. And it's at moments like that where I have a choice, and I recognize that choice, because everything in me wanted to just stay on the happy-go-lucky, you know, let's have warm fuzzies as a family kind of tone that we were having. And I had a choice whether I was going to be transparent and open about what was really going on. And yeah, we talked, there's a lot of great things happening now too, but there's challenges. And So I took a risk and shared one of the challenges that I'd faced, an unexpected challenge, just yesterday. And it was interesting seeing my daughter-in-law's response, where she looked at me and she said, "Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that must be hard for you." And I was like, wow, that's strange coming from my kids. Like she was
Yes.
empathizing with me, and it led to this wonderful conversation about things that they were going through, and bottom line, a deepened relationship. And during times of crisis, I found that relationships are usually treasured more than ever and valued more than ever. And yet at the same time, we don't often press into them as much as we could. And yet it's a great time to press into a relationship. So Angela, I'm on the journey. I'm like you. I have to make intentional decisions to be transparent with the family, but it always pays off. And I don't always do it. I'm not always perfect at it.
No, none of us are. And transparency via communication and sharing vulnerabilities is a way that we grow and expand, and we show to others that we care and that we're imperfect. Sometimes they may look at a family leader as someone who created a substantial business, everything they touch is gold, yet it's not. And the internal turmoil, especially during something like COVID and other challenges we're facing in a society at the moment, where they in many ways have no control over. And these are people that are perhaps used to having control. So it's really intriguing, which relates a little bit to my follow-up. And you were heading in that direction until I took us a little off track. And that is the importance of developing a family mission statement. Why is it even more important during a time of crisis and change?
Again, it's the constant. You know, a family mission statement or purpose statement, whatever you want to call it, is an expression of what your family is all about, what you really want to be, to do. It at least hints at the principles that you choose to guide your family, and you know, it's kind of your reason for existing as a family. And in our family, we've done this. Each generation develops their own mission statement that's built on the prior generations. And in that way, it encapsulates kind of for each generation the idea of what a good life looks like for family, and lays out the family's purpose. And the chances are that when you're facing unexpected crisis and challenge and turbulent times like we're in now, the purpose for your family, what a really good life looks like for your family, probably doesn't change that much, if at all. Right? Because those descriptors are typically things that are above and beyond any particular business or investment that we're succeeding at or not succeeding at, or working our way through at any point in time, right? Those are the things that are of long-term sustainable value, that create sustainable success in family and in life. And, you know, companies clearly use mission statements. We use mission statements to guide our decisions and actions in our companies, but and that's pretty clear on the value in a company, but it's even more valuable for a family. I mean, in a family, instead of whatever you're doing in business, if you're manufacturing widgets or whatever you do in business, in our family, we're manufacturing a legacy. We're developing next generations. We're making memories. We're constructing the very best stuff out of which life is made. And without clarity of purpose in business gets derailed from optimal success by challenges or opportunities that come along. And even more so, I'd say, without clarity of purpose in family, kids, if they're younger especially, can get swept along with the flow of society's values and trends. And the next challenge or crisis that comes along derails family relationships. But having a shared sense of values and purpose really bonds our family together. And I've seen this repeatedly in many families. The greater you see a shared sense of values and purpose, the more likely you'll see high levels of unity in the family and synergy, even in the midst of crisis and change. So that's my case for the value of clear purpose and values in family.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I suppose a follow-up question I would have to that is, the larger a family unit may be, and the different ages and generations that people are coming from, okay, you're going to want to have a mission and a shared set of values. How do you get equal input from those that are younger and from a different generation, and that may even have a different political belief system than you. There's a tendency for successful people to be iron-fisted, and that creates challenges in the generations coming up in the family. So it sounds good. Let's have a mission statement. Let's have a purpose statement. Let's share values. And then it's one person who's driving that. And if someone disagrees more than just a little bit, how do you show empathy to all sides and listen to input from everyone?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so vital in this process. And I think I learned my lessons of the principles behind the answer to that question fairly early on in my business career, actually, where as our businesses developed, we at one point we had over 2,000 employees in 18 states and multiple subsidiaries with presidents of those subsidiaries. And I tried to kind of foist our parent company mission, vision, and values on the presidents of those operating subsidiaries. And it really wasn't very successful because they couldn't get behind it because, we chose strong leaders. We wanted to develop strong leaders, and they wanted to lead out of their core what was important to them. And they didn't say it exactly the same way I said it. So we struggled with that for some years, and then realized, look, we need to give each of those subsidiary leaders autonomy and full empowerment to develop their own compass for their subsidiary, their mission, vision, values. But with just one guideline that it needed to be aligned with, based on, or built on, or some way directly tied to the parent company's mission, vision, values. And once we did that, and each operating subsidiary leader was empowered to do that with their team, it was like magic. The empowerment, the energy that happened was so much higher. So in our family, we've just ended up following a similar approach where we started this process when our kids were younger, and they were participants in the process of crafting these statements of direction and purpose that are important to our family. At least a couple of them were younger. But then as they got married, we have 3 married kids that of course have their own homes now. They developed their own family compass, and it was built on and aligned with the prior generations, but fully theirs. They own it, right? We frankly didn't have any participation in even crafting that, other than the values that were in them from how they grew up with us, right? But because I understand their values and their purpose, they understand the first gens, we're able to talk about those things and make decisions based on those higher principles that are above circumstances.
And no, that's very helpful. And I am going to give people a little bit of a shout out. If you're hearing it on a podcast, it'll be too late. But those that are live, and they're going to see it on a podcast later, is in about 2 weeks, I have a very deep dive with Lonnie, where basically he's going to be doing kind of a mini version of what he's done at some of my family office association events before. And that really is leading from examples and a framework that he provides that's going to be very, very detailed. So we're looking forward to that. I've covered this topic so much at my events over my 12 years, including with some prominent people and names. And I don't know if I've ever have had someone so impactful, where even in Santa Monica last year, I walked in and people were crying as Lonnie. So we very much look forward to an incredibly deep dive with him. I still have some questions. Why don't you give us an example or two how clarity of values or mission has helped your family or business during this crisis?
Yeah, I'll just go with some real current things. In one of our company values and flows out of one of our family values is that we value enjoying life with passion, and anything worth doing is worth doing with passion. So recently here, we had to make some decisions about whether we go forward with a business plan that we've been working on for a couple of years in a business, and that business was shut down from COVID. And the reality is we have multiple family members that have been involved in that, and we had a family council meeting about it. And there were some family members that weren't as passionate about it and the methods that we're using in this post-COVID environment. Or better said, the passion level that would have been required to make it a success despite the obstacles was not likely equal to the challenge post-COVID. And so the decision is, do we shut down? Do we pivot? And, how do you make a decision like that? And ultimately it came to talking about these two values. That one is that if we can't do what we're doing with passion and conviction, it's not worth doing. And secondly, another value we have is building a better world through entrepreneurial ventures. And that value is shared through all our generations. So since multiple family members involved in the business, we had this family meeting, and ultimately we decided to collaborate on finding a better way to accomplish the original mission in a way we could all be more passionate about and collaborate on, and still accomplish our value of building a better world through entrepreneurial ventures. And I was frankly concerned about having that conversation, whether it would get tense, because there was lots of different views on it. And people expressed their viewpoints very frankly at some point. But then afterwards, because we shared this same value, it was actually my oldest son who said, Dad, we're going to find a way to live out that value that we all want, even though it's not going to look like how we originally started. So that's one example. I'll give you another. It just happened this morning, actually. On a personal level, our third granddaughter was born last Sunday.
That's fantastic.
She's been in the neonatal intensive care unit for the last 4 days. And our daughter went into labor a few weeks early, and it was a very precipitous labor where there was no time to get her to the hospital. So her husband and my wife delivered the baby at home. Because there's no way we could get to the hospital. And even after that, the two closest hospitals, we couldn't get to them because of all the rioting happening around them. It was crazy. So long story short, little baby Blythe actually had a tough time. She coded a couple days ago. We almost lost her.
Wow.
But thankful she's getting more stable every day. But the conversation I had this morning was just it was a great example of the value in times of crisis of having a shared sense of purpose and values. This morning I had a conversation with Lachelle and Oren, my daughter and her husband, about all this. And our first Gen Family Compass vision statement refers to our family being what we call kingdom builders, which has a whole set of meanings that we've built into that phrase over the years, and includes rising above challenges to create culture like a king would do in a kingdom. And our daughter and her husband have their own next gen compass and vision statement. In part of that, their vision statement has a reference to being kingdom builders that prevail in every sphere of life. So this morning's conversation was about how this setback in their family and in our family was a setup to help them become even more successful as kingdom builders, and giving them a basis to help others prevail in every sphere of life. Because they have, especially my daughter, has a lot of people that look up to her as a mother and follow her. And anyway, I was thinking after that conversation, I think, it's so beautiful to be able to, yes, there's worry, there's stress about that, but to have the relationship deepen, because I understand what's ultimately important to them, and that thing that is their purpose is above this current crisis. And it brought our family together. So when we're together, rather than just talking about the latest thing that's happening in sports or the latest crisis in the news, which there's plenty of that these days, we tend to talk about how we're going to pivot, adapt, adjust, or continue to learn from what we're going through in order to better live out our values and pursue our purpose as individuals and as families. So it's a rich relationship building culture.
And we're a little pressed for time, but I thought it was important to do a follow-up to that. You covered a part of it, but what do you do to keep the values and mission of the family kind of, I guess I would say, in the forefront, so they actually create guidance and harmony in the family? What are some strategies or ideas that you've done that work?
So I know we're very short on time, so I'll just summarize it from a principle perspective, saying, look, many of you listening or watching this are effective business leaders, and you know how to do this in business. You can't just write down a set of values or a mission statement once and put it on a screen or put it in a file, hope everybody lives it. in business and in family, they have to be living words, living documents that guide daily decisions. And so, number one, refer to them often as a basis for decisions and actions that you take in the family. Point out when you see them being lived out among other family members. Of course, we have them posted where we can see them and things like that. But the final thing I say is also have consistent disciplines that you follow. In business, we have certain routine meetings, annual strategic planning retreats, etc., that help us refocus on our values and our purpose and our strategy. We've just learned to do the same thing in our family. We have an annual family goal setting retreat at the beginning of each year. In the middle of each year, we call it our annual family compass review vacation. We'll review these things. Anyway, we have a number of just routines or disciplines, systems that we follow that help us keep focused on our compass. And it's particularly important at times like this when we do feel like we're kind of flying blind, and we've got to just say, what is our compass telling us is most important right now?
And my last question for you, Lonnie, what else can people do during this time to fortify and strengthen their family?
Well, I would just say, once you've decided what's important, focus on taking actions, putting it on your calendar to do those things that edify and build up what's important. Families can use this time as an invitation to focus on our relationships and building stronger family bonds. So I would say, number one, use this time to amp up the focus on building relationships and on communication. During crisis, relationships and communication are more important than ever. But in our family, we sometimes don't prioritize that as we should. So and it's been hard in our family because we're all dealing with a new set of challenges. Like I said, we haven't had to before. And so we've had some conversations about how do we become more intentional about communicating during this time. We've had our first family council meeting via Zoom, and other, Zoom meetings that we didn't have before, and, more intentionality about asking questions that lead to valuable conversation in our family has been super helpful.
And we'll cover it more when we have a chance to do our unique one-on-one coming up in a couple of weeks. But for those that are interested in what you've built, your framework, some principles or guidelines to follow, how could they learn more and how you could be of value to them?
Yeah, I would just say, feel free to contact me. I don't know if you distribute contact information. You can find me just about anywhere. Just Google my name. I'd be happy to send you a process and some things that we've learned in our family about how this is best to develop and implement a clear family compass in your own family over time. And happy to share any of that with any of our audience at any point in time. And like you said, we'll cover this in more detail. It sounds like, what is it, on the 16th? I think we have a live event on this topic.
Yes, so we will cover it more there. Well, Lonnie, thank you so much. And again, as you're able to stay on and perhaps co-participate in some of the interviews I have coming up, because it is somewhat sequential on purpose and really unifies the message that we're trying to get out. On that note, next up, Joelle Jarvis. Joelle, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing great as well. It's great to see you. Well, Lonnie did a great job in kind of setting the foundation with what he's going through and some of the principles and some of the framework and structure that he uses. I guess questions I would have for you, and I got a couple. People overall are experience a lot of uncertainty now for a variety of reasons. Even the most confident and successful people are feeling like the future is uncertain. How can we create more certainty in uncertain times when there are so many unknowns?
So it's interesting. So, Lonnie said a lot of the things that are relevant to this topic as well. And I think one of the most important things is to remember that families are made up of individuals. And every individual is going to be going through their own process in this situation for different reasons. And we're already a unique inflection point. I mean, we've never had a time in world history where we've had, first it was the confluence events of the health crisis with the economic crisis. Then it was the health crisis with the economic crisis with the, psychological and social crisis of isolation. And now you add to it the civil and racial crisis that we're going through as a country. And it really is a perfect storm. But in that perfect storm, the amazing thing about that is it's kind of like all bets are off. One of the things, so I coach, it was interesting. I was listening to Mark Anson talk yesterday, and I coach partners in several of the firms that he was referring to that are people at the forefront of what's going on now with industry and investment, all of that. And the thing that's really interesting is that everybody has been kind of looking at who knows what to do next and what's the right thing to do and who's got the best insights and who's on the right track. And the truth of the matter is nobody's more of an expert than anybody else right now. Literally no one has ever been in the situation that we are in. So everybody's opportunity to contribute is valid. Everybody's opportunity to look for new ways of doing things is valid. And that's really important to remember. And, following on to what Lonnie said too, it's not like it's all sunshine and roses and everybody's out there just looking for opportunities. I mean, of course, there is part of that. And especially in the world that we are all in, there is that, the sense of there's going to be opportunities there. There's going to be new growth. There's going to be all these things. But we also need to process our own experience. And even the most successful people on the planet are still dealing with uncertainty. And it may be uncertainty with how to support their family through this time. It may be uncertainty because they're trying to figure out how to handle their employees who are going through a hard time. And they may or may not be able to handle those issues for them. I coach a lot of VC and private equity people who are supporting their founders, and they're not just supporting them with their business now, they're having to support them with their families and thinking like, how do we make these decisions and how do we make these changes and what do we do to move forward? So part of the way to handle the uncertainty is to understand that everybody is feeling that uncertainty. And so the certainty you can feel is that we're all in the same boat. The other thing I think it's very important to remember is that the only certainty you can ever really have, and this goes back to the individual, is a certainty that you have in yourself and that ability that you have to be resilient. And some of the things that Lonnie talked about that are so important for the family and keeping us together around our mission and around our values, it's even more important individually, because individually inside of our family, we need to be responsible for our own behavior. We need to be responsible for our own part that we play in this. And one of the other things that I encourage people to do that really I think is definitely helping them to feel more in control and to feel more confident about what's going on is a lot of what I hear from my clients, especially they're saying, we don't know how to really develop trust with our potential investment people right now, or our founders. We don't know how to develop trust with investors. It's hard to get to know people. We used to do this. We used to be able to have these meetings. We used to be able to go on these trips. We're not doing any of those things anymore. So one of the biggest things I tell people, to help to find a way to build solid ground is don't lament, innovate, and reinvent. It's not worthwhile to look at how we used to do everything and lament over how we can't do it that way anymore, the way school is, the way our families are, the way our businesses are run, the way we're commuting or not commuting, the way that we're engaging, all those things. It's wasted time, right? So the things that we can change are the things that are so important. Another way to build certainty, again, tailing on what Lonnie said, is build those structures, build those frameworks that you can run and operate your everyday life in so that you feel like you have some consistent things that happen. And they can be your routines and rituals. And Mike's going to talk about that later, but it really is about what can you control. You can control what you eat. You control who you talk to. You can control what you spend your time on during the day. You can control connecting with your family. You can control getting exercise. You can control deep breathing. There's a lot of things that you can control. And it's so important to control those things first, because when those things are controlled inside yourself, everything else feels better and everything else you can handle with much more agility. When I worked for Tony Robbins a long time ago, people used to say to me all the time, doesn't he really get angry? Doesn't he ever get upset? Doesn't he get those things? And I would say, of course he does. The difference is it's over like that. It's the resilience. It's not that we don't need to process what's going on around us. And even the most successful, I coach one person who manages billions of dollars in real estate, but he's concerned about his wife because she's really worried about things that are going on, and he's trying to be strong, but he doesn't know what to tell her. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of opportunity here for all of us, like Lonnie said, is to be real, to be authentic, but to line up behind what really matters to us. Focus on what we can do, not what we can't do. And remember that ultimately, the better state that we have ourselves in, building that certainty in ourselves, the better we're going to be able to handle whatever it is that's thrown at us in life.
How can we remain positive when we're constantly being barraged? I mean, no matter what news show I put on, and most of us look for confirmation bias, which is a mistake. You should have diversity in how you're getting your news, even with people or with organizations you disagree with. But it does seem like it's only the negative, and just constantly pounded by it. You almost feel like just ignoring that noise, but you want to have some connectivity to what's going on in the community and what's going on more globally. But how do you manage that?
There's a bunch of things to think about with that. And the biggest thing is what you're focusing on. And when we focus on something, we have a conversation with ourselves about it. And we don't just look at an event, we create a meaning from that event. So it's not so much just that we're being exposed to all these things that are out there, it's also what we make it mean. And one of the things I found really interesting in dealing with some of my clients is that as they're experiencing what's going on through this crisis, and they're seeing that something is different than the way it used to be, or the way they expected it to be in the past, they're saying, well, you can't do this anymore because nobody's investing right now because they aren't willing to do it unless they can meet you in person. Or, well, that industry's gone now, or whatever. And the truth of the matter is that entire thing, that entire belief system is based on a false premise. It's based on a story they made up about the information they were seeing. And, like you said, Angela, we can find proof for anything that we're looking for. We can find 100%
Yes.
validation from either side. And there's a famous story, and I've heard lots of different versions of it, but they said, if two wolves are fighting and one wolf is evil and one wolf is good, which will win? The one you feed, right? So you've got to be responsible for the story that you tell yourself. So some of the things I suggest to people to do is, spend time, see who you're spending your time with. Are the people that are around you people that are all doom and gloom? There's a very big difference in people who are providing information and insights to people who have an entire opinion and a position about it that is forcing you in a direction that you don't want to go. So protect your time. I mean, all of us now, we're getting Zoom requests all the time and all these meeting requests. And there's kind of like this thing, oh, well, I'm home anyway, right? I'll say yes. If someone is not adding energy and value to your life, it's taking away from value in your life. So you need to surround yourself by good people. The other thing also is ask yourself better questions. Questions like, well, what are we going to do now? Everything's different. Or questions like, how are we going to do this? We can't do it the way we used to. Or, why is this all going wrong? Or how can we ever recover? Those are not good questions to ask, especially during a time of crisis. You want to ask questions when you see facts or information. What else could this mean? What else? What's another way I could see this? What's another opportunity that I might be able to have from turning this around into a different situation? Again, it's not about being an ostrich and putting your head in the sand. It's just whatever, there's there's a movie called Shallow Hal that actually Tony Robbins was in.
Yeah, I saw it.
If any of you saw it, there was a scene after he gets, the character Jason Alexander goes to see Tony to get him to reverse the spell on Jack so that he'll see people for the way they really are instead of this magic spell that he worked on them, so he only sees their inner beauty. So his friend comes and he undoes the spell, and his friend says, you should be so happy, you should be thanking me. And he's furious with him. He says, well, why are you furious with me? He says, because now I don't see it the way I saw it before. And Jason Alexander's character says, but that wasn't real. And he goes, but it was real for me. And that is so important to remember, that whatever the story is that you tell yourself is going to be what's real for you. There was a real estate agent years ago. Her name was Marty Rodriguez. She worked out of California. She was a Century 21 agent. She outproduced the second highest producing Century 21 agent in the country by 8 times. And this was during the recession. And I remember she was doing a Power Talk interview, and Tony said to her, well, what do you say to people when they ask you, how are you so successful during the recession? She goes, I'm not in a recession. So, part of it is looking for what is your place in all of this. And to Lonnie's point, staying focused on the things that you're trying to accomplish. The other thing I've noticed too with my clients is that they're used to making choices. It's a binary decision. So either we can do this or we can do that. Either we can work at home or we can open the office. Either we can move forward on this investment or we have to give it up. And one of the things that I always tell people is, when you have one choice, it's no choice. Two choices is dilemma. I can't really take credit. That's just steals from Tony. But the three is you've got to have a third choice. Then you have options. So one of the best things you can do to stay positive is when you're faced with a dilemma, always come up with a third option. That third option causes you to have creative thinking. It causes you to be resourceful. It causes you to reach outside your comfort zone. You may reach out for expertise, but those are all things you can do to stay positive. Ask better questions, stay focused. The other thing too is if you do feel upset, I remember working with a girl when she'd lost both her parents and she was going through such a hard time and she was in her 20s and she was literally sobbing every day and she just couldn't get through her day. And I remember saying to her, you know what? It's appropriate to be sad. Like it's appropriate to be uncertain right now and scared. That's an appropriate emotion to feel. But then at some point you got to wash off your face, put on your makeup and get on with your life. So, when we're going through that thing, it's okay to have those moments, but we don't want those moments to have us. So the key right now is to manage your emotions. Notice when you're feeling uncertain. If you're feeling uncertain, take a moment. Check in with yourself. Ask yourself a better question. Look for another perspective. Trying to come up with another choice of the way to handle it. And if nothing else, go and do something that changes your emotional state. Change your energy, change your body. I know Mike's going to talk about some of the things you can do, but yes.
Very helpful. And like I mentioned with Lonnie, everyone, we also have a one-on-one coming up in 2 weeks with Joelle. That will be a very, very deep dive and kind of a special announcement to make. That's something that we're going to be involved in as well. And my members of Family Office Association will get a extra special benefit. But even those that are listening in, the potential opportunity to engage. And Joelle has an amazing background, and she mentioned she was really one of the first and earliest employees for someone like Tony Robbins and was instrumental, the sole reason why I was fortunate last summer to lead a 2-hour interview in Santa Monica with Tony. And she just has a world of experience and connectivity, and these are really, really important subjects. So I know you're all going to look forward to that. That's coming up in 2 weeks. In about the 5 or 6 minutes we have left, Joelle, with the days running together. And, I know what this is like, especially here in the New York area where COVID-19 is hit the hardest. Kids at home, working around the clock. And like I say, I don't think I've ever worked harder. So I've been really, really busy. How can people start to create structure and kind of a sense of normalcy around the chaos?
Biggest thing that I recommend for people, whether it's in your business or in your life, and similar to, again, to tagging onto what Lonnie said, talk about your values. There's also categories of your life that you want to keep going. So even though right now we're at home, like if I look at the categories of my life, I have my family, I have my friends, I have my health, I have my home environment, I have my career, I have my finances, I have my spiritual growth. One of the first things I suggest that my clients do is we get very clear on what their categories are. Same thing with your business. It may be, investor relations, founder interviews, board participation, whatever your categories are. What I recommend to people, 2 things. One is, right now, because everything's so uncertain, a lot of us are used to working in these blocks of goals, right? Like we have a 1-year goal and we're trying to accomplish these things. I've suggested to people a new paradigm. The new paradigm is have a 5-year vision and a 90-day plan, because things kind of keep changing right now. So know where you're headed and keep moving towards where you're headed. Make sure that you're moving constantly in the direction of the vision, but be flexible in the plan. What's going to make a difference in this world right now? There's some really new characteristics of leadership that are really emerging now as requirements for this new world, things that we didn't think about before as much. People who can be flexible, people that can be really resourceful, people that can make tough decisions quickly, people that can go and seek expertise when they don't have it. Like right now, there isn't time for a learning curve if you want to be successful or if you want to survive during these times. So creating a structure that allows you to say, okay, here's all the key elements of my life. or here's all the key elements of my business, and then set mini short-term goals in each of those categories. So it might be that you want to accomplish a certain thing with your health by a certain time, or you want to have deeper connections with people in your family, or you want to work on a new business project, or you're working on your regular business, but you came up with something in this situation that's a side hustle. What I recommend is schedule something from each of those categories in every week. I personally work in a system called Pomodoros. I don't know if you're familiar with work blocks. And I recommend, if you think about your life in work blocks of Pomodoros, every Pomodoro is either 25 or 50 minutes. So let's say you do half-hour Pomodoros. If you think about a day of 24 hours, you have 48 Pomodoros. Even if you sleep for 8 hours, you still have 32. That's a lot of half-hour blocks. So even if you fill up all the ones that you want to have for your work and those are solid, fill in the rest of the blocks with things from the categories from your personal life that are important. Those things that are part of your family mission and values. Those things that are part of building your relationships. Part of the challenge, and everything is amplified because of the situation we're in, right? Everything's amplified because of COVID. In our normal world, what happens? We get really focused on a project. Everything else flies by the wayside, right? We get head down on work and we stop exercising so much. We put that ahead, or we have a crisis with our family and work goes by the wayside. This is not a new occurrence, what's going on right now. So the way to have structure, reduce the chaos, and have your family time be better, and actually also get along better with your family, is I suggest to create a weekly plan each week that you can agree on. Things keep changing. Figure out who's doing the homeschooling, what time you do it, and make sure that everybody has time for themselves that's unaccounted for. You don't want to be in a situation where the wife's taking care of the kids all day or the husband's taking care of the kids all day, and then there's finally a break and they want to go and just chill out and relax because they need to re-energize and they need to recenter, and the other person's like, well, what are you doing? So we want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to do all the things that they really need to do to support themselves during this time.
No, that's very well said. And one of the live questions from our live participants that came in, you basically just answered relative to new rules. And by the way, that was asked from Chris Ray of Elevation Securities. And I must say, Chris is an active participant in many of our live meetings and incredibly thoughtful with his questions. So one of the great parts about especially being live and building community is having smart people that ask the right questions. So your peers and those you respect, you see how they're thinking about a specific issue. And that's the value of community. And even though it's not physical events, I get it, but the value of consistency and community, and the value of something like the chat feature and being interactive. You're not just sitting on the sidelines. Now, again, I can't get to all of your questions, especially during a more complex session with multiple participants like today. But a lot of the right people join us live, and interacting with them online and offline is a very, very important benefit, and honestly, a true value of being a member of Family Office Association. My last question for you, Joelle, you work with a lot of VC and private equity partners. Finally, a subject I might have a little bit of knowledge about. What are some of the most important insights you've been sharing with them throughout this time? Because they're going to be kind of the masters of the investing universe, but they have no control over COVID. No control whether their teenage son is upset. They only control what they're doing from an investment perspective. What are you both learning from them, sharing with them, and how is that relevant for family offices?
One of the things that I had already mentioned was that thing of really staying focused on the longer term plan versus the short term, and supporting their founders in the same, we're used to working in these milestone situations. And fortunately, for most of the people that I work with, their fundamental outlook hasn't changed overall in the long term as far as what they expect, but how they're operating the short term has changed. So one of the biggest things is really kind of looking at things in these 90-day blocks of how to work through, and just making sure that those blocks are laddering up to that long-term vision. The other thing is understanding, one of the things that's really interesting about this time is it really does give you freedom to do the things that you shoulda, coulda, woulda done a long time ago and didn't, whether it's in your personal life or in your business life. So a lot of the people that I'm talking to are for themselves or for the companies they work with, making those tough decisions to fire and change staff, to change a trajectory, to change their positioning, to change their packaging, to change their product line. Maybe they remove a product that they were going to be releasing, or they change the purpose of what they were doing or the tone of what they're doing. So a lot of it is figuring out how they want to pivot, but also understanding, like we talked about earlier, there's no experts right now. So it's kind of a judgment-free zone. And in this world, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people, trying to get the best deal and who's going to have the next unicorn and who knows this and who knows that. And right now, there's a lot of freedom to create and reinvent and start new. The other thing is the importance, the biggest thing that I found that is so surprising to me, we left, Angela, you and I talk a lot about how people in the family offices, they really want hard skills and investment opportunity and investment advice and all this stuff. But the thing I found most interesting is the most important thing that people are really learning that they have to manage is they've got to manage their own mental state. And they've got to do that in such a way that they can connect more efficiently with the other people around them, because they can't imagine or understand what's going on with the people around them. So the first thing is, I know Mike's going to get into this, is the importance of routines and rituals. Everybody must have routines and rituals. I've had people who I've coached for a while. They took a break for a little while because they were doing great. A few weeks later, they were back. Why were they back? Because they weren't doing the routines and rituals. If you don't start out your day ahead of the curve and something throws you off, you're underground. But if you start out ahead of the curve and something throws you off, you still rise above. And in our world, the difference between having your head on straight or not can be the difference between a multi-million-dollar decision. It can be the difference between a missed opportunity. The other thing that I really encourage people to look at is when they're dealing with the people in their lives, whether it's founders, and that's a big thing, honestly. A lot of the work I'm doing right now is coaching people on how to work with their founders and how to work with their partners in the firm. And part of it is to understanding the things that you're seeing from people. Don't get caught up or stuck in the situation that you're looking at or the particular thing that you're having tension or upset over. Instead, try to look at what is it that's really going on with them that's making them feel this way. And anybody who's ever studied Maslow or has ever been to a Tony Robbins seminar knows about the human needs. And there's only 6 of them, and I'll go really fast. It's need for love and connection, a need for security, a need for variety, a need for significance, a need for contribution, and a need for growth. I know that was really fast, but when you're listening and dealing with people in your life, and even with the founders, if you can understand that they're looking to get those needs met, and it's hard right now. Think about it, the need for connection. We're isolated. We're not seeing our friends and family the way we used to. The need for certainty, well, that's out the window. Even though most of the people in our world aren't worried about putting food on their table or a roof over their head, they may be worried about other people. A lot of us have people in our lives who employ thousands and thousands of people. They can't fix all their problems. So, there's still uncertainty for all of us. It's very difficult. How do you have significance? It's tough right now because, again, how are you showing up as a leader? How do you know you're on the right track? So feeling like you're making the right decision, all of that's hard. Contribution is definitely something right now we have a big opportunity for. And of course, all of us know one of the quickest ways to change your state is to help somebody else. And growth is the final one. How do you grow during this time? Again, this is a pause on life. We have a lot more freedom than we've ever had. We're home more. The time we all spent traveling, commuting, running errands is diminished. We have more time. It's an amazing time to take opportunities like these incredible podcasts that Angela is putting on every topic imaginable. How can you learn and grow? That you can do right now. But what I'm really working with my clients and what they're really trying to understand is when they're going through a situation, they're having this feeling, and it's usually physical, right? We feel it in our solar plexus, we feel it in our chest, a tightness, whatever. They're trying to look at it and go, what's going on with me now? And it's only one of those 6 things. So what they're really working on is how to recognize that in themselves and to figure out, okay, what do I need to do right now to restore that, to give myself that certainty back? And they're using it with the people that they're working with to find out what's really going on with them. So don't get stuck in the situation. Just like we were talking about a problem, there's an event and then there's a story about the event. And the story is whatever you want to make it. People call me a Pollyanna, but I go, look, 98% of the stuff that you worry about is never going to happen. So who's being realistic, me or you? Choose a story that makes you happy. Choose a truth that moves you forward. There's plenty of things we all know where life throws something at us and we have to deal with it. If you get thrown into a tailspin from a pebble, what are you going to do when we have stuff like now, which is a boulder? So that really comes down to keeping your head on straight, making sure that you're asking the right questions, having great focus, knowing what's going on, not getting caught up in the story about it, and staying on track and true to your ultimate vision. Like Lonnie said, that's really the overall, that's a great simple formula. Now, if it was all that easy to do, we'd all be doing it all the time and we would all be happy and joyful and satisfied and wealthy and all the time, everything. But, it takes work and it takes consistent work. So.
And we're going to have the one-on-one, like I said, in 2 weeks, and that'll be a deep, detailed dive. In the meantime, for those that may want to learn a little bit more about what you're doing at Mindset Mastery, is there a website? How can they learn more about your work?
The website is mindsetpartnership.com. And I am excited. You will be hearing more because we've actually created some special, interesting programs with Family Office Association. So it's exciting.
Yes, that'll be exciting as we roll that out this summer. Right before we segue to Mike Packman, again, those of you on a podcast, it'll be past tense, but you could probably look up the podcast if you didn't notice it. But our live attendees, we have some great guests coming up in the coming weeks. Next Tuesday, I happen to need to do 2 of these, and they're both massive guests. So we have at 1 p.m. Eastern next Tuesday, Peter Diamandis, the legendary Dr. Peter Diamandis, futurist, investor, and really deep thinker, including about some of the challenges going on now with COVID from a racial tension perspective. So he's just going to be fantastic. We're really excited about that. And that same day, later in the day at 4 o'clock, we have probably the person from my experience who has invested in more startup companies than anyone ever. And that is Dave Mcclure, currently doing something amazing, but formerly the founder of 500 startups. It's ironic. I'm like, Dave, you've invested in like 1,300 companies. He's like, yeah, I didn't plan it, or I would have called it, 1,300 startup, not 500 startups. So next Tuesday specifically, we have amazing guests. They will both be podcasts. And upcoming, and I'm a big sports and boxing fan, really excited to have Larry Holmes on discipline, on competition, on coming from nothing, becoming something, and hanging on to it. So really, really an interesting guy, and we're very much looking forward to that. On that note, let's transition everyone to Mike Packman. Mike, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Angela?
I'm doing good. Well, you're going to be the heavy hitter here. So you heard Lonnie, you heard Joelle, and I think you're going to tie in really, really well. Why don't we start with, it's been hinted, but let's get right to it. What's the importance of routines and rituals, and how important is it in your life? And how do you think they've benefited to your tremendous successes in business?
I was actually thinking about this, and before I had this meditation routine in my life, I thought back to my earliest rituals and routines, which came at a time when I didn't even know what I was actually doing anything that was called rituals and routines. But if you look at what those words and what they're made of, they both need focus, discipline, and goals. And my first job, I knew I wanted to be really successful. So I had a goal, and I decided I was going to be the first one in the door and the last one to leave every day. And I decided to put a plan together of where I wanted to get to, and then every day executing on that plan of things I needed to do to get there. And it worked. I was successful. I had a lot of success early on, even before I started my own businesses. And during that time of working, I had been an athlete my whole life growing up. I played tennis for my high school and played basketball for my church team. And then I started working and focusing on that work. All that energy went there, and I started to get out of shape. And after a couple of years of it, I decided it was enough and I needed to do something about it. So I said, okay, let me start applying this focus and create some new rituals and routines in my life. And said, okay, I need to go to the gym pretty much every day, and started going to the gym every day, and then started watching my diet and watching what I was eating and how much I was eating. And all of a sudden changed my body and got back into the shape I had been in, and actually ended up being in even better shape than I had pretty much ever. And all from creating those new rituals and routines, and learned a bit about nutrition on it. I looked in, and just first it was like, okay, let me eat so that I can look good. And then it kind of transitioned to, well, what am I actually putting in my body? And I started learning about nutrition and understanding what was in. I started reading labels, understanding what was in every single thing I was eating. And it's funny, in our house, it's more often the wife than the husband that's label conscious and watching everything. And no, the kids shouldn't eat this, the kids shouldn't eat that. But in our house, I'm the one that looks at that. My kids even know, like, does that have garbage in it, Daddy? And so I started to realize that, yes, having success and it feels good to be successful in business and to create things. And it feels good to look good and feel good. And part of feeling good is also what you're putting into your body. So if you're in good shape, you're exercising, and you're putting the right amounts of good quality food in your body, it helps you to feel good. And I went through this process, and everything externally focused in my life of what I needed to do to be happy and feel good. And even throughout all of that, I just felt like there was still something missing. Which ended up leading me to Tony Robbins. And I initially joined Tony just to find, to be more successful and make more money. And I did learn some amazing business strategy and more importantly, some of the psychology behind business. But what I wasn't looking for that I did find, which is even more important, was the whole spiritual side and how I ended up starting meditating, and ended up going to India with Tony on a trip that I didn't even want to go on because I had no interest in meditation, monks, or mindfulness or any of this. Yet I went to India and was exposed to it, and it changed my life forever and created some of the routines I have now, and the way I look at life has changed so much because of that. And I can get into the meditation routines and what I do and the rituals I have. But, I realized looking back, it kind of all started with having those goals and having the discipline to put the focus on what needed to be done in order to achieve those goals. And that works in any area of your life, as Joelle was saying before, whether it's your business, your finances, your body, your spiritual growth, all of these things. It's just about applying this focus to those areas. And the way that you consistently apply focus is to have rituals and routines. Because if you don't have those in place and do them every day, everything starts to slip off and fall off. As we all know, and I mean, we all go through times where we're in better shape or worse shape. I know personally, we all go through times where, like, you're going to the gym, watching everything you do great. And then you go through months of too much eating out and not exercising enough. And you're like, whoa, what happened? And then you go back and you know what? You lost those rituals and routines. All right, I got to get back to the gym. I got to get back to watching what I'm eating. And then what happens within a few months, you're back to where you were. But as Joelle has mentioned with her clients happens, where they're on track, everything's going great, they do it, and you don't think you don't need it anymore. It's like, oh, well, I'm here, everything's great. One of the things that the human condition is, we always think whatever is happening right now is going to continue forever, whether it's good, whether it's bad, but we're always in that mindset of, like, it's never, you think about it, even when the weather report, right? If it's a beautiful day and they say it's going to rain for the next 3 days, is it really going to rain those next few days? It's so beautiful now. Or if it's been pouring for 3 days and they say, yeah, it's finally going to clear up. You're like, is it ever going to clear up? I think it's going to rain forever. And it's just this human condition that we have to just, whatever we're in the middle of right now, we expect to go on. So when you put in that hard work to get to a place, you get complacent in that space, and it's easy to start letting some of those rituals and routines fall off. And then all of a sudden things start to go the other way. And the quicker you catch it and make that shift to go back, there'll be no slippage or very little. But if it's, months go by of letting those drift off, you can end up in a very different space and have to really work yourself out of it again.
Maybe a deep one for you, Mike. Before something like routines, you have passion to purpose, and you have goals that your routines, and I would almost call it obsessions. So are really habits another word for routines. But my real question is, we change, the world around us changes. What we're doing now may not work in a day, a week, a month, a year. We probably need to adapt our routines, including with what we're going through now in COVID, as well as other issues. When do you know it's time to change what you're doing?
You know, and that's interesting is, you know, and I've done a lot of, once I found this path of meditation and trying to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, it's led me to, you know, have an understanding of the world out there is really just a reflection of the world that's going on inside of ourselves. So the better you know yourself, and if you spend a good amount of time on those rituals that are working on yourself, and you get the relationship with yourself right, then whatever is happening in the world, you'll be able to interact with it correctly. There's a famous yogi, a book actually I shared on the call with John Emerald, Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda, and he said, only the man who reforms himself first can reform the world. So if you can really, really work on yourself, you'll know what to do. You'll know what you should change externally. Because honestly, everything that we do is just, you know, all any person wants to be is happy, right? We just want to live happy, peaceful, joyful lives. That's what we truly want to do. So everything we're trying to do out here and accomplish out here is to get to those ends. And the more you realize that nothing out there is ever going to give that to you, that you have to find that inside yourself, and then you can enjoy everything out there. It's, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't accomplish things and build businesses and have great relationships with people. It just means that you can't look for those things and those accomplishments and those other people to bring you happiness. If you can find it within yourself first, then you're interacting with those situations and those people from such a deeper level that will give you even more fulfillment.
I mean, I suppose there's an irony, and there's nothing wrong with this. You want to be open and honest to the audience. But, you know, joining, say, what Tony Robbins does, really your perspective going back years ago was, I want to meet amazing people and get better at business. And I'm going to be around these kind of people, and I'm going to make more money. And if that was a goal at that time, there's nothing wrong with that. So you, like you said, you indirectly stumbled into more of a personal fulfillment. And a lot of that was spurred by the trip to India and becoming more familiar with meditation, breath work, etc. So there's nothing wrong with that. You came in it from a more commercial, or let's call it a selfish perspective, but you adapted. Is there one specific incident or person that you met that caused you to look at things differently?
You know what, it's actually interesting. So when I went to India with Tony, which, you know, again, I literally went on that trip kicking and screaming because I really didn't want to go. And then I went there because all my friends were going that were, you know, other Tony Robbins Platinum members. And I ended up going on the trip. And, you know, what I had some incredible experiences there. I was, you know, introduced to meditation there, and I was able to I remember the first day we went through the meditation there, we had this really long meditation, and I had never meditated before. Most people in the room, there's about 100 of us, and all very successful entrepreneurs, type A, you know, nobody that really wants to sit still for more than 2 minutes. But nobody wanted to sit there and be the first one that couldn't do it, right? So everybody sat there, you know, to make sure that they weren't the only one not being able to do it. So kind of use the type A to be focused and calm. And I remember after finally opening my eyes after longer than probably any New Yorker thought possible, I remember going outside, and it was Tony, and how he does things is different than anybody else, right? So we didn't have to go to the mountains and find the monks. He brought the monks to us at, you know, a 6-star hotel in the middle of this lake that was just beautiful, amazing setting. And I remember walking outside and walking to the railing of the lake. And I remember looking over to my left, and I saw Tony, and he had this really, really peaceful look on his face. And I realized then that that's exactly how I felt inside. And for the first time in my life, I realized I felt that way without having to accomplish anything. You know, this overachieving mentality my whole life. And that's how I felt happy. You know, even if that happiness lasted for seconds or minutes or days or hours, whatever it may be, that's how I got it. You know, I got to the next level, or I closed this deal, or created this, or got, you know, whatever I needed to do to that accomplishment to get that feeling. I got that feeling just from sitting in a room and meditating and being at peace with myself. And, that trip, started the process, but it took a couple of years later two things were actually real changing points for me and kind of tipping points for me. One is about 5.5 years ago, I just decided I'm going to meditate every day. For some reason, I woke up and said, you know what? I've been meditating. We came back from India and I would meditate maybe 2 or 3 times a week for a short period of time. So I didn't really make those permanent changes. I didn't adapt those rituals and routines. So my life didn't really change much from that standpoint. And then I decided I was going to meditate every day. And within 4 months of every single day, and I started out 10 minutes a day, so it wasn't like I was doing an hour of meditation a day. It was just 10 minutes a day, but it was committing to, this is something that's going to be a part of my life. And then I actually was on a trip with John Amaral, who we had on a few weeks ago. And on one of his sessions where he was working on me, as John mentioned, he's an energy worker who works on Tony for 15 years or so now, I think. And he just does amazing work. And he's a chiropractor by trade. So initially when he started, and so he works on you on a chiropractic table. And after one of the sessions, he was working on me. It was about 4.5 months into this meditating every day. I just had this kind of just really awakening experience where the whole world just got really clear and everything just really shifted in my whole life from that point. I remember I had like the 30 days after that, it just a sequence of synchronicities in my life. I found that book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which I just couldn't put down. And from that, I started studying other works by Paramahansa Yogananda. And the meditation I do today is something called Kriya Yoga, which is what he taught, what was passed down through his line of gurus. And it's a very special breathing technique that leads you to some very, very deep meditations. And just kind of that 30 days, all these changes started happening. And it was just happened to be triggered by, making a decision to commit to the meditation every day, having someone like John to just kind of trigger what was going on with, kind of a energetic shift within inside me. And then I just, all of a sudden they say meditation rewires your brain. So you just, all of a sudden you just start, there's this shift and you start thinking differently and all of a sudden I wanted to know these things. I wanted to understand, what are all these thoughts I'm having? What are these emotions I'm having? Why do these things happen? Why do we make these decisions? Why do we keep making decisions that we know are bad over and over and over and over again? And then, you start to learn about the subconscious mind and most of the things we're kind of on autopilot that, if we're not watching ourselves and being observant, the subconscious mind is just controlling everything that we're doing. And unfortunately, for the majority of the population, they'll run through their entire lives without ever even thinking about it. But one of the things that meditation does is by taking that time, and the breath is very, very important. It's just, doing deep breath work just is one of the things that can, to change and trigger these changes within yourself. But between the deep breathing and that time of sitting there and just focusing on really that relationship with yourself. You think that, we spend our whole lives working on relationships from a business standpoint. How do you get business? If you don't have relationships, you don't have good business. If you don't have relationships with your family and your friends, you don't have family and friends. So what about the relationship with ourselves? And the only way you can work on your relationship with yourself is by sitting there in meditation and reflection on what you're doing. And, one of the things that Yogananda taught was at the end of the day, to go through, 5 minutes before you go to sleep, go through your day and see the decisions that you made and, which side of you won today. Joelle, you talked about the good wolf and the bad wolf and that goes back a long time. And, so we have these two sides within ourselves and you look at the end of the day, okay, who won today? How did I act today? And when you start looking back at this, you start being more mindful of like, wow, I don't really like a lot of the decisions I made today. Well, by doing that process, the next day, when you're faced with those decisions, you are going to be more aware of those decisions. And when you remember that, you look back like, wow, 10 times last night, I thought back on, and I made 10 times, I did the same thing that I don't really like, the behavior that I do. That, when whatever that is that triggered, say, you being angry about something the next day, you're going to remember that, and all of a sudden you're going to be aware of it. The first step to all this is that awareness. And that's where the mindfulness part comes in. Mindfulness just means being aware of what you're doing and being mindful of do I really want to act the way that I'm acting? And as Lonnie, what you were saying about your, this, having this family mission statement and these values and what you want to do, you're keeping in check how you guys are interacting with yourselves and with the world. And when you see that person who you really are, you have, when you only have to be honest with one person in life, and that's yourself. And at the end of the day, if you're reviewing what your day was, you're gonna, you can lie to yourself, but that's not going to do anybody any good. And when you look at the brutal, honest truth, you say, well, I got to make some changes, and you start being aware. And it's not easy. Just habits, especially habits that we've had for a very long time, are very hard to change. But I've noticed just by that awareness level and the meditation, I've noticed things that, Joelle, you said about Tony, doesn't he ever get angry? Doesn't he get mad about things? And yeah, but it's quick. I've noticed that if I do get angry, a lot of times I'll just even be aware of somebody about to piss me off. Right? I see it. I'm talking to somebody, whether it's somebody within the company or it's somebody, in family or wherever it is. Like, you start to feel that emotion rising up within you by cultivating that awareness. All of a sudden, you start to feel that frustration rising, and you notice it and say, do I really want to be frustrated right now? Because if you think about it, it never feels good to be angry, right? Any negative emotion doesn't feel good to be angry. It doesn't feel good to be fearful. Yet it's so easy to hang on to these emotions. Once they start, they just grab onto you. But if you can catch them as they're just starting, they can dissipate. You just become aware of that and say, you know what, I don't really want to engage with this emotion. You're not pushing it down, because you do have to address it. But when you see that anger rising up and you feel it, if you can catch it before it starts to take hold of you at all, it never comes. But what I've noticed, that even when it does get the best of me, I have 2 little kids, so it can be easy to get frustrated, especially at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you've had 14 hours with them and they're still not listening. It can be a little bit frustrating. But what I do notice, if I do get frustrated, I can catch myself really, really quickly and bring myself back to that space. So it's just done tremendous for me on, how I interact, just because I've learned on how to interact with myself and how I want to see myself.
Very helpful. And a couple of people that were live texted, oh, what's this John Amaral you're talking about? So a little bit of a heads up on that. John is incredibly unique, very popular now, featured on some TV series as well. That's John Amaral. He's an energy practitioner. He does amazing things that are almost hard to describe. We had him on the podcast, so those of you that were live then, it's not been released yet, but if you're hearing this on a podcast, that will probably have been released. And there was some audio complications, mainly me getting out of it. I couldn't get back in. And basically, John, with Mike's help, kind of ran with it. The audio quality, because of how it was recorded, is not as good, but we're hopeful in about a week or 2 for the live listeners that should be up on my podcast channel. And if you're hearing this on a podcast, I'm 99% sure, because that was done like 3 weeks ago. We're a little backlogged, that we'll be able to get that up. And it was a lot of fun. You're going to lead us in a short meditation in a second, Mike, but I do have one question. I brought it up to Carton Davies, the 2-time U.S. gold medalist I had on Monday. And she was great. And that was me watching the Michael Jordan documentary. And I believe it was the last episode, someone who's kind of a mentor to him said, hey, there's not many, but there are some people that were equally or even more talented than Mike. The advantage that he had was mental purpose and clarity. And then they lean over and say, the really big thing was he's amazing at being in the moment. Now, he could look back and say, in his last year, let's say, I've missed 9,000 shots in my career, just like Babe Ruth struck out probably, 1,700 times. If you think about that, it's going to impact how you feel at the moment, perhaps even a positive reflection looking back. So how do you stay in the moment? And we're going to get to the meditation shortly, but if you had to give us a concise answer, how do I remain in the moment?
That's actually a really good one. It's something, it takes a lot of work. And I'm constantly reminded, especially, the easiest thing to do are simple things, like when you wash your hands, when you brush your teeth, when you're just walking down a hallway. And it's amazing. But if you just let yourself be in the, you feel like a little kid, right? All of a sudden you're washing your hands, and you just don't let your mind, every time your mind tries to think about something else, the way you stay in the moment is you just focus on washing your hands, and you just putting the soap on and watching the water go on, and just stay completely focused on that. And you watch, you can't help but smile. Because I have little kids, so it's easy for me because I see it every day, but they just take such joy in the simplest things, because they're just being, right? And it's the when you just are present, you feel so great. I remember I tried, and I go in and out too. I've got a lot going on too, so it's hard for me not to get caught up in all the thoughts and everything I need to do. But when I remember to do it, when I'm walking down a hallway, I'll try to just, if it's a long hallway, I'll just try to just concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other, and I'll just start laughing. And I'm like, I feel like I'm one of my little kids, because all you have to do is be, and you bring joy to yourself. Tony has a great quote. He says, we're human beings, not human doings. And we get so caught up in the doing that we forget to be. And when we can just let ourselves be for a moment, that's where it comes in. So every chance you get to try to force yourself into that present moment, let go of all the thoughts of whatever else, because all you ever have is the present moment, right? The past is gone. The future hasn't happened yet. The future is just a future present moment. The past was a present moment that's now gone. So all we have is a succession of present moments. So the more we hold on to those present moments, the more times we can be in that present moment, the more joy we're going to have in our lives. Because if you're worrying about something happening in the past or something that might happen in the future, you're going to miss every single present moment of your life. What Jordan was what he was so great and why he was so joyful to watch is because he was in that present moment. And any great athlete, I'm sure, will tell you that same thing. They were so focused in where they were that that energy that they had wasn't just that they were so great. It was that they enjoyed what they were doing. So by them being so joyful in what they were doing, it was in such flow that you couldn't help it. If you ever think about it, when you watch, if you watch, I'm a big sports guy, and I can watch any sport. And when you see anybody who's incredible at a sport, you can just get like that tingly feeling of watching them. That's why everybody loves to watch sporting events, because you're watching someone who's truly in that present moment, truly joyful in what they're doing, and it brings out that same feeling in yourself. So my advice is try to do it with everything, especially the people in your lives when you're with, when we're eating, enjoy that food. I was reading a book recently, and they said that the reason that people started praying before they ate was to prepare themselves to enjoy that meal and slowly be grateful for what they were eating, so that they would be focused on the ritual of eating. And I have a terrible habit of eating too fast, so I'm not the one to ask about this, but and I constantly try to remind myself to make sure I'm enjoying my food. But so many of us do that. We go through our food, or when we're with our kids, you have businesses and you're with your kids, and especially if you have little kids and you're playing with them, I would notice like my mind all over on the 50 things I had to do when I got done playing with them. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to miss all this time I have playing with my kid. I'm like, well, fortunately I meditate, so I know how to bring my mind back when I'm meditating. So when I'm sitting there with my kids, I'm like, okay, you know what? File that work thought over for later. I'll deal with that. This is the time I've allocated to my kids. And one of the things I'll do is even if I'm really busy, I'll give my kids 5 or 10 minutes at a time. This has been extremely helpful, especially now, right? I'm upstairs working. I'll go downstairs to get some water, and it's Daddy, let's play. And I'll say, okay, here, I'm setting the timer on my phone for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll give them my undivided attention to play with them for those 5 or 10 minutes. And I will try totally to stay in that present moment. Whatever we're doing, I am totally focused on that. I'm not worrying about what I'm going to do in 10 minutes, because let's face it, nothing is going to change in 10 minutes. Eckhart Tolle says this very well, and a lot of people have probably heard of Eckhart Tolle. He's a famous spiritual writer and speaker, and he's written a few books that have been extremely, extremely famous and popular, and he's all about being in the present moment. He's the key is when Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There we go. Losing the present.
Being in the moment.
Yeah, being in the moment. But Eckhart constantly talks about, and some of these things I've picked up about, say like when you get in your car, about, take a deep breath. When the first thing you get in your car, we're so quick to turn our car on, but to sit in the car, take a deep breath, and just be present for a moment there, and just in everything in your life, just take that time to just really be in what you're doing, and that's so much more joy will come from that. And it also helps when you're dealing with these. I'm sorry, that's some thought. I knew it would come back to me. He said that, there is nothing. The present moment is always perfect, because nothing can really happen. I mean, unless you're in the middle of a war zone, there's really nothing's going to happen in the next 1 to 5 minutes that's going to be life changing. So whatever you want to do right now, especially like when you're with your kids or with a family member or a loved one, whatever you're doing, that the immediate present, there is really nothing that no reason you can't give it your undivided attention. We think, oh my God, I've got 50 things to do today. Well, the next 1 to 5 minutes isn't going to change that. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't matter what might happen in the next 5, 10, 20 minutes, years, whatever. This exact moment, everything is totally fine. You have no risk. You have nothing to be fearful of or worries or anything else. There's no reason you can't be focused on this exact moment. So the more you try to do that and focus on it and be aware of it, you'll find just these kind of joyful feelings coming through your life.
Now, we are pretty significantly over on time, but I do, of course, want to do the meditation. Be mindful, pardon the pun, that we probably want to keep it somewhat concentrated. And those which are the majority are going to hear it on a podcast, so they're not going to have the visual cues. It's a little harder depending on how you talk them through it. But let's do it. Can you lead through a simple meditation that would be easy for us to practice on our own? It's all yours.
Absolutely. And you know what, Angela, if it's easier too, maybe I can make an audio recording and you can send it out too. So of a simple meditation that, happy to pass on as well.
Doing it in the framework of the podcast is probably best. It keeps
it. Or I'll do that now too, but I'll also, but I'm saying if you want to send something out, I can do a quick recording
of course.
of it.
I'm sure that now that you mentioned, I'm going to get requests for it too. So feel free to do
that. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Angelo. I appreciate having this opportunity to share some of this. So, all right. So everybody just close your eyes and just raise your gaze up a little bit to the point. So you're looking kind of up between the point between your eyebrows, just gently looking up there, not a hard focus. First, all we're going to do is just take some deep breaths, and you can keep your hands folded in your lap. You can put them on your knees, whatever is comfortable for you. So we'll start with the deep breaths. And you can let your breath return to normal. And as you do, just tell your body to relax. And just let go of all thoughts of the world, all concerns you may have. Just focus totally on that space of your breath. Just watch it coming in naturally. And just count your breaths from 1 to 10. When you get to the 10th breath, you can just start all over again. Just not trying to breathe deeply or in any way, just being observant of your breath, just watching it coming in and out. Just notice the gentle, peaceful pace of your breath. And if your mind wanders during this time, it's totally fine. It happens to everybody. It doesn't mean you don't know how to meditate. It's just what the mind does. If it wanders, just let it go. Go back to that focus on watching your breath coming in and out. Go back to wherever you were counting. If you lost your count, just guess where you were. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Just completely calm and relaxed. And just notice that space. Notice how good it feels to just watch that breath. And as you're watching your breath, shift your attention to your heart area. That might have been where you were watching the breath. If you were, just continue to do that. But just focus on your heart area. You can put one or both of your hands on the middle of your chest or your heart area. And just feel that space. And inside your heart, just picture a soft white light there. Just picture that comfort and peacefulness. Just how good it feels to just letting go of everything and just being focused on that space and that source of light. Just so peaceful and relaxing. It brings comfort and joy. And inside that light, feel all the gratitude that you have for everything you've ever experienced in your life, the people in your life, the relationships you have. Even in these times, think of what you are grateful for. Think about the time you've maybe had to spend with some of these family members, the moments, or even times before this, whatever you have total gratitude for. And just feel that space, that white light in the middle of your chest just represents all the gratitude that you have, all of those people, those relationships. And that gratitude is just that love and gratefulness that you feel. And just stay in that space and just feel that soft light. Feel the breath coming in and out. Feel that gratefulness. Notice how good it feels just to be grateful. And hold on to that space again. If your mind wanders to things you have to do later on or things that happened before, it's okay. Just acknowledge those thoughts and let them go and just come right back to that space in your heart where that light is. Go back to that gratitude. We're just going to take one last deep breath. And after we take that breath, when you're ready, you can just open your eyes. You can stay with that space for longer if you want. But after you let that breath out, you can slowly open your eyes and come back. You look very calm and peaceful, Angelo. I didn't want to disturb you.
It worked. It did make me calm and peaceful. Shockingly, not many things do. On that note, everyone, that was fantastic. Mike, thank you so much. And
Sure,
we'll save a business and real estate discussion for a point in the future. And I don't know if you have this on what you just led us through, but for those that really enjoyed it, do you keep a personal YouTube station where you have some of this up, or how could people learn more about your methodologies relative to this?
I don't, but people can email me. I'll record. I've never recorded it before, but I'm happy to just record a simple meditation like this. So people want to go back to it, to just, something quick, they can just push on their phone and listen to this and do a quick meditation. I'm happy to do that. And I'll share here. I can put my, I'll put my email in here. Here we go. Something.
Which for the live participants would be great. So why not?
Okay. Here. And then, I guess when you do the podcast, you won't be able to see, and there won't be anything there to see. So you can reach me at MP for Mike Packman at knpre.com. So that's Kite, Nancy, Peter, Robert, Edward.com, MP at knpre.com. And feel free to email me about this. I'm very passionate about this path, and happy to share anything I can be of a resource or help to anybody.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you, of course, Lonnie and Joelle as well. This was a lot of fun and hopefully very impactful for our audience. So I'm going to keep my close incredibly short today. I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of Angelo Robles's Effective Family Office podcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, etc. I'm the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. Thank you all to our special guests, our live participants, those that will see this on YouTube, and mainly through our podcast, which would be our largest distribution channel. We hope you all enjoyed it and very much look forward to the next time. Thank you, everyone.